have close to 20 attendees in the room with us. Welcome everyone to the 2020 Volunteers Football Preview put on by the Knoxville Bar Association. I want to mention that this program was originally planned as a senior section program, but due to the pandemic, we have moved it to a virtual program and opened it up to the entire membership. So I'm glad that all of you are able to join us today. This is the 10th year that Tim Priest has done a volunteer preview for the senior section in September. I know that Tim needs no introduction, but I do want to point out a few highlights of his resume. Tim is one of the greatest defensive backs in UT football history. He served as a team captain and was all SEC in 1970. He became Tennessee's career leader in interceptions with 18. Served in one of the greatest defensive backfields of all time that set still existing SEC and school records with 36 interceptions in 1970. Of course, we know Tim as a fellow attorney, trial lawyer with the firm of Pryor, Flynn, Priest, and Harbor. And he's also the color analyst for the Vol Football Radio Network, along with play-by-play announcer Bob Kesling. And it's in that capacity that Tim joins us here today. Thank you, Tim, for being here with us.
Glad to be with you. I wish I knew a little more than I do as we get ready to talk about Tennessee football, but these are unusual times.
Well, hopefully you know a little more than we do, but I understand that that things are very different this year. And so the first question I'll ask you, and also by way of introduction, let our audience know that there is a question and answer box at the very bottom of your screen. If you click on that, it will allow you to type questions into the box. And so we will be taking audience questions throughout the webinar today. And we'll try to keep an eye on that and ask them to Tim as they come in. But Tim, obviously, you know, we're meeting in this strange new way through Zoom because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it has made a lot of changes to Tennessee football this season. But for you personally, how has COVID-19 altered your routine as a color analyst this year?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how we're going to do it. We have had some, I've had some discussions with the Vol Network people and discussions with Bob Kesling. How can we safely broadcast home games and away games? And what are we going to do that's different? Tennessee's booth, broadcast booth for radio is the best I've ever been in, and I've been in a ton of them in the last 20-something years because John Ward and Bob Kesling got to design it rather than some architect or engineer. And so we've got a little more space than almost everywhere else we go. But we're going to cut down on people that are in the booth. We're going to have these plexiglass shields between each one of us. Usually there's 5 on the front row. There'll probably be 3 on the front row now with Brent Hubbs, who's a spotter, a VolQuest guy, very knowledgeable, Bob, and then I'll be there. And then other folks will be back behind us. No strangers. Usually some of the big donors come in and stand up in the back a little bit during the games. That nothing like that's going to happen. Everybody will have masks. And then we got into away games, and I said, look, at my age, I don't think I want to be on an airplane with 75 or 80 players and 150, 757, every seat's full. I always wonder how 300 pounders can sit side by side, but they make it work. But anyway, I told them I didn't want to fly, you know, and so away games, I'm going to drive, except probably Arkansas. That's too far away. And I don't know if I'll drive by myself or somebody will want to go with me, but I don't much want to be on an airplane away. And so you're kind of trying to take precautions. Of course, right now, Jeremy, I think, is beyond paranoid, and rightfully so. He couldn't scrimmage last week. They haven't scrimmaged at all. I don't ever go to practices preseason. I can't get much out of seeing them go through drills and stuff, but I always go to 1 or 2 scrimmages and you can usually get a pretty good idea who's going to play and who can help you, and see some young guys and all. Well, they have a scrimmage, and don't know if they'll get to scrimmage before season comes along, and that's all because of some players have had the virus, but a lot of them, most of them, are quarantined just from being around the other guys. So it's a strange preseason, put it that way.
Well, and you've sort of answered this. I was wondering if you and Bob had gotten to see any practice, and
I haven't been there, and I don't think Bob's even been out on. He says Jeremy doesn't want anybody on the practice field but players and coaches right now.
Well, I was gonna mention that Coach Pruitt does seem to take after Coach Saban with regard to controlling what information gets out of practice. Does that make your job harder?
Well, not really. I when the season starts, I go over each Wednesday evening about 5 o'clock, getting close to the end of practice, maybe watch the last period of practice. And then Bob and I visit with the coordinators, Jim Chaney, offensive coordinator, Derek Ansley, defensive coordinator. And it's kind of they're pretty free with us, I think. And it's kind of, well, how's your team doing? Who's healthy or not healthy? Tell me what you think about Georgia's defense or offense, or having to do something special for some players and things. And they're pretty free with us to give us some information, kind of what they think the strengths and weaknesses are of the opponent, and our own strengths and weaknesses, maybe who's playing really well for us, things like that. So we get some information that's helpful to use you on Saturdays. So I expect to be able to do that game weeks, but I haven't really asked yet to see if that can happen. But that kind of gives us a preview. And then we can also watch video of the coming opponent and get some ideas. What kind of offense do they run defensively with their scheme, some things like that. We can pull up any game we want on their system over there and watch that. So we get some information that way, and that may be the first time I get to see them. Usually I go to preseason scrimmage, and tell you one story about that. In '98, I wasn't doing the games, but Bobby Scott and I did a call-in show after the ball games in those days. So I went to preseason scrimmage, and T. Martin threw 3 interceptions, and they looked awful. And so I came back to the office, and on Monday, everybody said, "Hey, what'd you see?" I said, "Gosh, we're going to be 5-5 this year," or something like that, and then win the national championship. So I'm not too good a predictor.
Well, Tim, you mentioned that they haven't had the opportunity to scrimmage yet. I watched the BYU Navy game Monday night. I don't know if you got a chance to see any of that, but the broadcasters noted that Navy had not had any contact. They hadn't been tackling or blocking in practice out of concern for health and safety. And BYU clearly had been blocking, tackling, because they pretty much mopped up the field with Navy. How has Tennessee been practicing? Have they been full contact?
My understanding is they have had drills, contact drills, tackling, blocking, but not in a scrimmage setting. So they're at least used to hitting some, but not much. And they haven't had a scrimmage as of yet. And usually they'll have 3. The first one will be the Saturday, first Saturday, or the third Saturday before. They'll work their way down so that when they have the last scrimmage, they'll go into game week right after that. But I don't know how much they're going to get to scrimmage. You don't want to do too much because you don't get players hurt. But at the same time, I can understand how Navy was a great disadvantage. If you can't scrimmage at least once or twice preseason, I think you're at a definite disadvantage.
All right. And we've already seen issues, as you mentioned, with Tennessee players testing positive for COVID-19, and we've canceled some scrimmages and practices. Do you expect this to be an ongoing issue for Tennessee throughout the season, or for all SEC teams?
Of course, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'd say yes. College, even I guess they're young enough they aren't scared. like, or they don't have a healthy fear of the virus. But I saw, I think today that University of Tennessee has 2,000 students in quarantine and
Right.
400 and something active cases. Um, you know, after a ball game, usually you go gather with a few of your buddies or your dates or whatever. And I think it will be a problem all the way through. I think Jeremy Pruitt is doing his very dead level best to control that, but that's hard to do. I don't think they've had a whole lot of actually active cases, eight or nine, 7 or 8, something like that. But the problem, the quarantine problem is this: all the position groups meet separately in separate rooms every day before practice. You'll have your offensive line in a room, and your secondary in a room, and your quarterbacks in a room. Well, if just one guy or 2 guys in a room comes up positive, you may have that whole room wiped out, particularly quarterback room. I understand that Tennessee's actually, besides their quarterback room, they're going to get one of these guys that was a high school quarterback. They've got maybe a freshman, and teach those guys at least a few plays, and as kind of an emergency backup if they had to have it. But if you sit down, and of course the quarterback room's smaller than the offensive line room, so you get one guy that's infected in there, you probably wiped them all out.
Right.
Now, Jeremy wonders if the others, the social distancing rules and things like that are local or statewide. I think he wonders if Alabama is quarantining them just as long or what. I don't know. But that could be a disaster sometime during the season. We hope it doesn't happen.
And I know, if you just read the news, that Tuscaloosa has had real issues with the spread of COVID-19 on their campus. Have you heard anything about other teams in the SEC about them having to cancel scrimmages or issues that other schools have had similar to what we've had here?
I really haven't, but most of the times the coaches in those situations don't want to give out too much information. Now, somebody's going to find out whether you actually scrimmage or not, probably no matter what. But I haven't seen very many. I saw some big numbers coming out of Clemson, I think, on the news a little while back, but I haven't seen it in a lot of them. So I don't know if they can keep it quiet or not. I don't know what's going on there.
Well, and I saw Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma yesterday said something about how he wasn't going to release their COVID numbers because it would put him at a competitive disadvantage, which, we've heard that about injuries, but it's a little concerning when you're talking about a contagious disease that a coach would say something like that.
Yes, I would agree, but there's a little paranoia in all preseasons for all coaches of somebody's going to find out too much about us. And now, of course, that's multiplied with the virus.
Certainly. And do you know how the protocols are going to be during the season in terms of how often the players will be tested?
My understanding is weekly, and that it's somewhere like Tuesday or something. So if it takes a day or two to get a result, you still got time to do some figuring on what in the world you're going to do on Saturday. But it may be twice a week, but I'm not sure. My understanding is once a week. And I'm sure they're, shooting you with a thermometer every time you turn around to be sure you're not got somebody. I was at a kids basketball tournament last weekend, the AAU Nationals, and Adam's daughter's team played in it. And every time you came in, they wouldn't let you in the building until right before your team played, and they shoot you in the head to be sure you don't have a fever and all that. I imagine that would be multiplied big time for what's going on in college athletics.
I'm sure. So, Tim, you've said you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to ask you for a prediction here, or maybe not a prediction. How confident are you that Tennessee plays a full 10-game season this year?
Oh, gosh. Not real confident, to be honest with you. I hope they do. It's fun but it's daunting to think every team is an SEC team you're going to play for 10 games. Even when I was in school, we played 10 games until I was a senior. Then they had the 11th game in 1970. We didn't play but 5, 6 SEC opponents in those days, and usually we had a good like UCLA or somebody as an out of conference, but we also had somebody like Wake Forest we were going to beat up on. So 10 SEC games. This is a tough lineup. It's a tough lineup. Even the ones where we'll be favored, which is probably not more than 5 of them. Kentucky will be favored, but they'll be good. They've got a good football team, well-coached team.
Well, that leads me to the next thought I had, which is that in a strange season like this, where it is only SEC opponents, 10-game schedule, what would progress look like for Jeremy Pruitt in year 3? Because we won 8 games last year, but we could have a better team this year and go 5-5 or even 4-6, couldn't we?
At 4-6, they won't like it. They probably won't like it at 5-5, but they've got to pull an upset probably as far as preseason ratings are going if we're going to win 6 games. Georgia, Alabama, A&M, Auburn, Florida. Those are tall orders for anybody, but we're hopeful. The fans, it's kind of interesting. Getting Florida in on December the 4th seems everybody wearing orange seems to think that's an advantage over going or playing them in early in season. Well, we haven't beaten them in forever. And the last time everybody remembers is 2001 when we went down there after 9/11 and beat them. But it'll be an interesting season. I didn't think they did us any favors saying we were going to play A&M Auburn as our 2 pickups from the other side. A&M is going to have a really good team, and Auburn will too, but they got very veteran quarterbacks. But you got to beat somebody over there, and they have spread it out a little bit. We get 2 winnable games right off the bat, even though one of them's on the road. Then we get Georgia. Then we get another winnable game, and we'll see. I thought the schedule, the way it was spaced out, was probably about as good as we could expect, considering who we got to play.
Right. Well, and talking about how the schedule is structured, you and I have talked about how where losses fall on your schedule if you have losses, and who those losses are to can really sort of dictate the narrative of a season. Remember last year we started out 1-4, and the sky was falling, but then we finished with 6 straight wins, and everyone felt great going into the off season. This season, we closed with Florida, which, win it or lose it, it could go a long way toward how Vol fans feel going into the off season. So I know no one's got Pruitt on any kind of clock right now. He's still in early in his coaching tenure at Tennessee. But for any coach in the SEC like Jeremy Pruitt, is this basically a free year just because of how strange the circumstances are, and no one really has any expectations?
That's a good question. Tennessee fans, no, they want to win more no matter what, and that's to be expected. Jeremy wants that, I think. Right. Any coach wants his fan base to be that way, but it's a strange season, and somebody in the SEC is going to do a lot better than everybody expects, and somebody's going to fall out of that top echelon and probably not do as well. We need to be the one that takes a step up and comes out of the bottom half of the league. But this is a tough schedule. And, Kentucky's somebody traditionally we've beaten so many times. Of course, last year, Javon Blakely, a third-string defensive lineman, tackles their quarterback at the 1-yard line right at the end of the game and saves us there. But they're well coached. They've got a good offensive line. They're a better team than the Kentucky teams we've been seeing through the years. You flip it the other way, Vanderbilt beat us for 2 or 3 times there for a while, but they seem to have fallen back. where you're going to beat them, but you got to beat somebody in that upper tier to have a good season here, I think.
That's right. And you know, every year we tout our national recruiting rankings, which always sound good because we're top 15, but then you look at the SEC and we're 6th, 7th, or 8th in the SEC, and it's almost like the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, even though we finish pretty strong nationally.
Yeah, they do a good job recruiting, I think, and I think they have recruited some really plus athletes. We've got some players on this team that particularly I think of Trey Smith, maybe the best offensive line in the country. Fortunately, his health issues seem to have subsided. Or you get somebody like Henry Toto, who's certainly one of the very best linebackers in our league, and probably we don't give him but 2 more years and he goes pro. But we've got some players, and of course Cade Mays, who's been in the news a lot lately, who's transferred here but is not yet eligible. But these are players that are on the highest level of anybody in the country. And we're filling in pretty well. We've got some positions I think we're going to be pretty strong. We've got some positions where we don't know yet whether they're going to be pretty strong.
Well, and that brings us to on the field. You mentioned Cade Mays. We've got an audience question. Do you know when a decision might be expected on his appeal?
What I know about it is this. The NCAA never tells you when you're going to learn. They never tell you reasoning. It's not like a writing an opinion in one of the cases we're trying and explains why he rules however he does. That just doesn't happen. And the NCAA is a strange organization, in my opinion. Very weak during all the pandemic. But the thing I think that's, and I've never done one of those cases, but what makes his a little harder is if you transfer within your conference and you transfer within your division and you're going to play for an opponent right off the bat. That's nobody's ever said that to me, but that seems to make it a little harder. I think there's optimism that he's going to be cleared. Aubrey Solomon last year got cleared the week of the first game, and he was coming from Michigan.
Right.
Started on our defensive line all season. I hope he makes it. Cade is a heck of a football player, and he would help. If he doesn't make it, Jerome Carvin played that position last year a lot. Rajon Kell did. We should have a good one of our best offensive lines, which hopefully leads to good quarterback play this year.
Well, and I was going to say, even if Mays is not cleared to play for us, this offensive line looks like it's capable of doing some great things, doesn't it?
They do. Last year we started 2 freshmen at tackles, Darnell Wright and Wanya Morris, both good players, but and both, I'm not much into these star rankings, but lots of high stars and all that. But playing the offensive line, offensive tackle in the SEC and trying to stop some of these outside rushers. But now we've got an offensive line that's got tremendous amount of experience, good players. We got probably 4 out of the 5 that'll be pretty high draft choices someday. That's certainly a strength on this team. And I'm hopeful and I'm thinking that leads to better quarterback play. Garantano has been really good at times and really bad at times, but he never had enough time to throw the ball. Sometimes he's held it too long, but this year he should have better protection, which hopefully leads to better quarterback play.
And granted, we haven't scrimmaged yet, and you certainly haven't seen it, but the reports on Garantano coming out of fall camp have really been glowing. And this is a staff that I don't know that they have typically really talked up all players, but you'll do that sometimes with a quarterback just for confidence reasons.
I think that's good. He's put on some weight. He's about 230 now, which helps you take some of those licks, get a little extra. But he's really got a good arm, and at times he's been terrific, but at times he's been really bad. I think 2 years with Jim Chaney, 2 years with Winky as his quarterback coach, but particularly with Chaney, who's absolutely in the 20-something years I've done it, one of my favorites to deal with over there. He's one of the guys we talk to each week, but 2 years under him, I think a second year will really be good for Garantano and one of the other guys, if one of the other one plays very much. But Jim's been around it forever. He's coached all over the place. He's coached in the pros. Got a good sense of humor. It can be biting sometimes the players, I think. But frankly, if you just boil it all down, we'll go as far as Garantano will take us this year. And if he plays well, like 2 years ago he did at Auburn, he was fabulous. He outplayed the Auburn's quarterback by a long ways and won the football game. Hopefully we can see more of that this time.
And another hot name for Vol fans ever since he committed is freshman Harrison Bailey. Do you think there's any chance we'll see him on the field this fall? I mean, obviously if we do, that means either things are going really well or really badly.
Yeah. Last year or last fall, one Saturday night, I was at home and I turned on the TV and Marietta, Georgia, where he played, Cobb County, was playing a team out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that had traveled to Marietta to play, and the Pennsylvania team scores with like a minute and 20 seconds or something to go. And I said, well, now I'm going to get to see how good this guy is, because this was high-quality football for high school. 4 passes later, with 20 seconds left on the clock, Harrison Bailey had Marietta scoring, and they ended up winning state in high school down there. And Georgia football is as good as anywhere. If you can get the cream of the crop in the greater Atlanta area or get some of them, you're really getting good people. So he's played against top-notch competition. I don't know how much this year he would be out there. Brian Maurer played well at times. He got a little loose with the ball and didn't protect the ball sometimes. And J.T. Shrout did some good things. So I don't know, but if you're looking at that room, you're saying Harrison Bailey's going to be a star someday. Is it going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be next year or what? But I think he's got a bright future at Tennessee. How much will happen this year, I don't know.
Of course, I remember we had an experienced quarterback taking the field with 3 guys behind him back in 1994, and a hot young freshman. His legacy was born that day, unfortunately because of a bad injury to the starter. But let's hope that doesn't happen.
If Harrison Bailey could be anything like Peyton Manning, that'd be really good. We could even wait a year for that.
We'll take that, right?
Yeah.
Well, Tim, the Vols offensively lost a lot of production at wide receiver with Jawan Jennings and Marquez Callaway moving on. Who should we expect to see stand out from that unproven group this year?
The first one that is kind of proven is Palmer. He was the third receiver last year when we had 3 on the field. He's a pretty good sized guy, 6'2", 200 pounds, and I think he'll certainly be one of the leaders. Brandon Johnson, who led the team in receptions 2 years ago, but redshirted last year, will be back. He's about 6'2" also, but they've got a couple of young guys. I think they really went hard. They're high on a guy named Jalen Hyatt, who, let me think, he's from South Carolina, right close to Columbia, where the University of South Carolina is. About 6 feet tall, really fast, but a really polished receiver. Also in the bowl game, Ramel Keaton, who's another Georgia boy, had a couple of big catches. He's 6'3". Tillman played some last year from Las Vegas, big guy, 6'3", 215. So I think they're expecting those guys, and they've got some more freshmen that I think they're high on. But who's going to appear and who's going to come out? Because they recruited, I think they had 4 or 5 wide receivers in this class, something like that. But some of those need to step up. one thing that tempers that a little bit is we've got two backs that are really good receivers out of the backfield. And Eric Gray came on, of course, in the bowl game. He was fabulous last year. Best play, I'll remind our viewers, one of the very best plays in the history of our football team was that onside kick at the end of the game against Indiana, where we kick it and it bounces right perfectly up, and Eric catches it, and then 3-4 plays later he runs the touchdown to win the game. But he and Ty Chandler give us a really good start at tailback. Both are fast. They got, I watched Greg early in the season, and I couldn't tell if he was fast or not. He had a lot of shifty moves, but when he played Vanderbilt and ran for 250 yards in the dressing room after the game, I interviewed him. I said, "Will you run the 40?" He said, "I ran 4.45." I said, "Wow, that's really fast."
Right.
I could see he's faster than I thought he was. But and Ty Chandler is fast. He was a sprint champion in high school. I think he won the 100 in the 100-meter dash in the Tennessee high school state championship. So that's two good ones. They got a guy named Jabari Small out of Memphis too. I think our Chris Christian down there. We had a lot of kids out of Memphis lately. But they think he's about 200 pounds, and both Gray and Chandler are a little over 200 pounds. Okay, but they need a big back too, 3rd and 1. That might be T. Hodge out of Maryville. But somebody got to get that hard yard. Last year it was Quavarius Crouch, the linebacker. But somebody's got to get that. The other backs aren't quite that big.
All right. Well, speaking of Marquez Callaway, as I did earlier, who do we expect to be returning kicks and punts for the Vols this year?
That's going to be a guy named Velus, I believe is the way you pronounce it, Velus Jones, who transferred from Southern Cal. He's a senior. He ran either punt or kickoff, I think 3 back for touchdowns last year there, and for some reason decided he wanted out and transferred here and was granted to be able to play. So it looks like he's going to run punts and kickoffs back. I haven't seen him in action yet, but that's a pretty good resume coming in.
His reputation for speed precedes him, I guess.
You bet. Need some of that.
Well, staying on special teams, I guess we've still got Brent Semaglia kicking for the Vols, right?
Yes, and Paxton Brooks will punt and kick off. And Semaglia was very good last year. I don't remember his stats, but he hit a 50-yarder during the season, and he's a senior, so he's a veteran, and pretty confident every time he goes out there, he's going to likely make it. So we're pretty good in those spots, I think.
Well, before we turn to the defense, we've got an audience question. We were talking earlier about Lincoln Riley and announcing positive COVID tests, and one of our viewers wants to know what different types of gamesmanship can you see different football programs using to hide how many players are out and why?
Yeah. I don't really know other than you just lie about the numbers. That's what I'm saying. But, there's always people the press is snooping around, the newspapers need stories. And there's somebody like Ballquist, Brent Hubbs, or one of the people that works with him, that get friendly with the coaches and the people. But, I don't see that there's too much benefit to hiding your numbers, because when you get there on Saturday, everybody's going to know if you're 20 guys short coming out of the locker room, it's going to be pretty obvious. But hopefully that doesn't happen for Tennessee. But, I'm obviously no expert or anything like that, but these guys just got to be careful. And they, we're not having a party over at Joe's apartment and all drink a 6-pack together and somebody spreads it around. We can't have that. And imagine our head coach, I'd say he's pretty dang strict on what's going to happen with these guys between now and kickoff.
But you can see how much like Bill Belichick at NFL level, he lists Tom Brady as questionable all season long. And everyone knows what's really going on. But Not just for the gamblers, but for the opponents as well. If they spend all week thinking that someone's playing at an important position like quarterback, and then they get there on Saturday and it turns out that guy's out with COVID, and all that preparation was for naught, you could see how that would change things.
It would, and particularly at something like wide receiver or something where your speed guy is the one, somebody like Jalen Hyatt is not going to be able to be there, or something like that, or you're losing, for heaven's sake, To'o. That's a hole you can't plug. There's nobody on that roster that can do what he can do at linebacker.
Right.
So hopefully, we got a full contingent when we go to South Carolina in a couple of weeks.
Well, I know some conferences that are playing this fall have announced thresholds for COVID in terms of how many players that a school needs to have available in order to play. And I don't believe the SEC has made any announcement like that. Do you know if one is expected from the conference?
I haven't heard anything about that. I imagine they want they want the TV money. They don't want the game canceled. I guess every stadium is going to have 20 or 25,000 people there, something like that. That's going to be an interesting dynamic. We go down to South Carolina in a couple of weeks. That's usually a pretty rowdy place to play. And how loud can 20,000 people be compared to 80 or 100?
They'll be playing that rooster sound nonstop.
Oh, yeah. They'll have the cock crowing down there.
Well, Tim, let's turn to the defense. The main question that comes to my mind when I think about the defense this year is, will we be able to get after the quarterback? That is the big question, I think. We have every single down lineman back that recorded a tackle last year. Darrell Middleton from Oak Ridge. I remember watching him in high school play against Farragut. He was a tight end. He was 6'6" and 250 pounds, and I was thinking, he could run. And now he's, 300-something pounds. And Greg Emerson from down at Jackson Northside, Aubrey Solomon, they were the main starters last year. But Latrell Bumpus, Correct Garland, Matthew Butler played. All of those guys have a lot of experience. I wouldn't say there's an All-American in the group, but they're pretty good. Inside backer, you've got To'o. I'm guessing Crouch. I'm not sure. Corvarius Crouch. J.J. Peterson, who was our big recruit from a couple of years ago and so far hasn't panned out, but hopefully he can help them. And Jeremy Banks, after a very publicized incident, apparently he's really towed the line, and he's a player. He's a football player. But where you get your rush mostly is the outside linebackers. And we lost our chief sacker last year. Late in the year, particularly, Kevon Bennett, who people may remember Cornelius Bennett, if you're an SEC person. He was an All-American linebacker at Alabama. This is his son. And, of course, Cornelius was a big pro for years and years. He really finished the year well. And then DeAndre Johnson started part of the year at the other outside linebacker. We've got to get rushed out of somebody in those guys. And we may end up sending inside backers more. But Roman Harrison, who's a guy from South Georgia that nobody much wanted. And one thing I admire about this staff is they really don't pay a whole lot of attention to the stars that these boys get. And nobody knew Roman Harrison until he committed to us, and then everybody wanted him. But he's a pretty good rusher from the outside. But, I don't know. We don't have anybody maybe as dynamic as somebody that we lost last year. But we'll see. Now, they get more inventive. If you remember in the bowl game, Sean Schamberger had a sack or two from the nickelback position. If we have a strength in the defense, I'd say it ought to be the secondary. They're going to be that was going to be
passes on them, yeah, but but they're pretty good, and they're experienced. All the people that be playing are juniors or seniors, except for Jalen McCullough, who's a sophomore at safety, and he played very well the last half of the season as a starter last year. But Alante Taylor, Bryce Thompson, Kenneth George, that's three really good cornerbacks. I think they got a pretty good chance to be. And I've noticed they put some weight on these guys. Trevon Flowers, who's a football player, and came in here at about 175 pounds. He's like 195, 200 now. But we're pretty good in the secondary. We've got 7 or 8 guys that can play there. Now, you got to get some rush on the quarterback. If you got all day, nobody's going to defend a good receiver. And there's lots of speed at receiver in our league, but we ought to be pretty good back there, I think.
Well, I know that the defensive back is near and dear to your heart, but
that was a different world back then. Not little slow guys running around out there on the field.
well, importantly, it's near and dear to Coach Pruitt's heart as well. And of course, he comes out of the Nick Saban coaching tree, and Nick Saban is a big defensive backs guy. So,
tell you what, Derek Ansley for first year, last year was his first year as our coordinator. He was hired away from the Oakland Raiders, now
right.
And was the highest paid secondary coach in the whole NFL. So he's now probably the highest paid secondary coach and coordinator. Been very impressed with him when we meet with him on Wednesday nights. Very strategic how he's got his game plan laid out. Really encouraging to his players. Puts them in good schemes. I think he's been a real plus. The year before, our defense rated 77th in all of college football. Last year it was 28th. That's quite a jump. Now, a lot of that obviously is who runs out there on the field and makes tackles. But Ansley has been a real plus, I think, and we're paying him to be a plus, but he has certainly helped our defense get better.
And he and Pruitt seem to do well together. I remember early in Pruitt's tenure here, there were some questions about whether Coach Pruitt was trying to do too much on game day by being the defensive coordinator as well as the head coach. And so
I agree. I think he's been able to let go of that a little bit, and he never was too big on the offensive side. That wasn't his forte as an assistant, but I think he has more trust in Derek Ansley than he did previous coordinator, and that's proved to be well positioned.
That's a comfortable place to be in for a defensive-minded coach, right?
You bet. I'm not sure he's ever comfortable, but he knows he's got a good guy calling the signal over there.
Well, we spoke earlier about the Cade Mays situation. Of course, nobody knows what the NCAA is going to do or when or why. But it reminded me of last year in basketball. You know, we had a big recruit coming. Well, not a recruit, a big transfer coming in. Euros Plavsic, and we waited and waited and waited and finally got to see him play. But it makes me wonder if UT's efforts in getting these players cleared, if there's a leak in the system somewhere, or I guess that's not the right way to put it, but do you know why we keep having trouble with getting these guys cleared to play? Is it a UT only phenomenon, or do other schools have the same issue?
You know, I'm certainly don't have expertise in that area, but I don't know that it's any very much different for us than anybody else. But as far as I know, everybody that comes just about has their own lawyer to try to help them get through. And I don't know that I know very much about Cade's situation other than the lawyer that they had hired originally down there was not the one that placed the petition or whatever you call it before the NCAA, and maybe they didn't have as good a representation as they should have had. Greg Isaacs, I think, is representing them now.
I saw that.
Greg will leave any stone unturned, and he will give them a really good shot at getting Cade eligible to play. Well,
I saw that Greg's involved now, so we know his skill as an attorney. So maybe we'll see Cade Mays on the field sooner rather than later.
I hope so.
And of course, there's a lot of local interest in Cade Mays being a local product of Knoxville Catholic High School.
Yeah, his little brother Cooper will probably be our backup center. He's quite the good player also. He's not quite as big as Cade, but you don't necessarily want a 6'6" center anyway, particularly if the quarterback's going under center. He's got his hands up here in his face trying to take
Right.
But yeah, Cade could be a real help to us in the offensive line. But if he doesn't make it, we still got guys that have played quite a bit. Carvin or Calvert could both play that position.
Shouldn't the NCAA just have an automatic rule that you get cleared if you transfer to play with your little brother?
Well, there you go. But you know that they said they were going to have, starting this year, I thought, everybody had one free ride. You could transfer anywhere you want to one time. Of course, if you're a graduate, you can do it anyway, and they can't stop or can't hold back your eligibility. But since they've already announced that, or at least I understand they have, that starting next season it's going to be that way, why not do it now in these strange times if people want to try? But I don't know. We'll just see when it comes out. And I don't imagine that there'll be anything from the NCAA explaining their reasoning, whatever.
Right. Well, and that can be tough. It's good that we're so deep at the offensive line position, because I remember with Aubrey Solomon last year, it was, everyone was on pins and needles wondering, okay, when are we going to get an answer to this?
Right, exactly. And of course, I don't know how that one was handled, but he got it in time, and we've got about 2.5 weeks. Hopefully we hear that Cade Mays is going to be playing.
How does the team deal with a situation like that? Do you just practice assuming you're not going to have him, or do you practice assuming you're going to have him? Or
well, I think there's some of both. But as far as the players go, I don't think they pay much attention to it. They're just trying to play their position, whatever it is, and do whatever they've got to do. And they figure whoever we plug in at left guard or right guard is going to be able to do the job. But for Cade, I can imagine that it preys on your mind a little bit. Am I going to be able to play? If he doesn't play, he's already gone through his junior year. I would assume he'll go into the draft.
Right.
But I don't know. Certainly we would hope to get a season out of him, and he could be a big help to the offensive line.
Well, I'll remind our viewers we've got about 10 minutes left here, and if you have any questions, you can type them into the question and answer box, and we'll see if we get any more questions, Tim. But why don't you take us through the 2020 schedule and just give us your impressions about each of the opponents and how they're looking this year and what our prospects are.
I don't know a whole lot, but I can go off of history, at least. South Carolina, it'll be a rowdy bunch of 20,000 down there tailgating and going in to play. We're playing at 9, 7:30 at 9. We played there 2 trips ago. We played a night game, but it was much later in the season down there. They get pretty rowdy down there. Muschamp seems to be somewhat on the hot seat. They're not too happy with the way things have gone. We certainly will be favored. But I don't know enough to give you much other than they're not picked in the top half of the league. Missouri was, for last season, was Garantano's best game. He had a fabulous game, threw for 400 yards. It was cold and the wind was blowing and it kind of rained a little bit. And I guess Derek Dooley is still their offensive coordinator calling the plays.
Right.
But they have some offensive weapons. I'm not sure they're real good defensively. It's good to play here. Their stadium is outside of Vanderbilt rough. It doesn't. It's not an SEC like stadium that you go to anybody else. Georgia will be good. They'll be a co-favorite to win the league. Playing down there.
How's their quarterback situation looking? Didn't their quarterback, was he talking about opting out, Georgia's quarterback?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I
All
don't
right.
know. Just know that, let me tell you, you talk about an easy place to coach college football. You got 60, 70 miles away in Atlanta, greater Atlanta area. You got all the players you could ever use.
Right.
Of course, they're going for players at other places too, but there is so much talent. High school football is so good down there. So they're going to be good, but to tell you exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are, I don't know. Kentucky is one of the better coach teams in the league. That's our fourth game. Their offensive line is going to be good. They're usually pretty tough defensively. We seem to have an easier time with them playing them at home than we do when we go up there. So that's that. Alabama, they're Alabama.
That's right.
You know what? We almost had them on the ropes last year when we ran a quarterback sneak instead of handing off to Crouch, and the camera shot from above showed a wide open hole. Crouch would have likely scored, and we would have been within 8 points of them in the fourth quarter. I guess that was the fourth quarter, maybe late third quarter. It didn't happen, but I like the way we hung in there with them. We got after their quarterback some, but they've got probably two, and I'm not going to get their names right, but two of the fastest receivers in the league. Waddle is one of them. He is so quick and so fast that they scared you. I got what I've done. Here it is. Arkansas, we ought to beat. We're going over there. I don't know much about them except they haven't been very good lately. A&M's quarterback Mon will be back. He's a senior. He's been a starter for 2 years. They're a good football team. Their program, they totally redid their stadium 2 years ago when we were down there and played them, or that's maybe been 3 years ago now. But they a fabulous stadium. What I was told they did was at the end of the preseason, the previous season, which I think was 16, starting the next day, they had crews 24 hours a day, tearing out a lot of the old stadium and then building the new stadium. So there were 3 different work crews that did it. No telling how much money that cost. They had a lot of oil down there then, but a really nice facility. And there's, high school football in Texas, and they've been better than the University of Texas in a lot of years. So they'll be tough. Auburn, Nix is back after being a starter his whole freshman year, right out of high school. He's a player, and they've got speed at receiver. We beat them down there. Hopefully we can do that again. Let me tell you this about all the booths are somewhere on the side. Ours is as close to 50-yard line as you can get in any stadium I've ever been in, but you're always somewhere. They moved all the broadcast booths, their booth and the visitors booth, to the end zone.
Really?
You are dead in the end zone. I was looking right down the sideline for 100 yards, and when the ball got out to the 35 or 40-yard line, we had no idea whether the guy gained 5 yards or 2 yards or 8 yards. Kesling was trying to call it, and there were people complaining because he wasn't getting the yardage right. Well, hell, you couldn't tell how far they got. But what they did is they sold the old press box area to donors that wanted to pay a lot of money for a box, so they stuck their broadcast and ours dead in the end zone, and their food's the worst in the league. Vandy, we ought to beat Vandy, and their food is right there with Auburn. Florida, my best memories of all the games we've done, the most fun game was beating Florida in 01 down there. It was Travis Stevens had an amazing ball game, over 200 yards rushing, and we all thought we were going to beat LSU for a second time and go off and play in the Rose Bowl. I'll tell you a funny story. we had an offensive lineman, Will Offenhuzel from Martin, Tennessee. It's about 6'8". We had just won that game, and the word had come back in the dressing room that there were 5,000 students at the track. And when the plane landed, everybody is going to be taken to the track on buses, and they'll have kind of a pep rally or something like that. And so we're standing on the tarmac at Gainesville. They shut down the airport at about 7 o'clock. But we're standing out there in the dark waiting to get on this plane, and I'm standing next to Will Offenhuzel. And I said, Will, I hear that they're partying big time on the campus. When you get back, I said, now, be careful and don't do something that'll get you arrested. He said, Mr. Priest, he said, they won't arrest us tonight. I said, no, they won't, Will. Well, we laid an egg the next week in the SEC championship game. But that's the Florida game that we remember the most. And hopefully we can duplicate that up here this year.
Well, we've had some memorable ones with them over the years, but the victories, unfortunately, have been few and far between.
Very much so.
We did get some audience questions here. One, you mentioned money and donors. Someone wants to know, since there's going to be a big drop-off in revenue, do you see the school dropping any non-revenue sports?
I don't know about that. I hope not. But they'll borrow some money, I'm guessing. I don't know the finances of the university or of an athletic department, but some people, my wife Betsy and I she said, I'm not going to go under these circumstances. And so we said, you can have the money we pay for that. You need it more than we do right now, and have the tickets. But I would think it's going to take several years to make up for the losses that you incur in 2020 and maybe in some of 2021. And I don't know really how you're going to do it because it's millions and millions of dollars. But hopefully TV revenue will help with some of that. But losing all the ticket sales, seems like it's going to really take a few years to get over that.
All right, and we're getting close to the 1 o'clock hour. There's 2 questions here from the audience that are very similar. What is your most memorable game and play as a UT football player? And someone else asked, what is your favorite memory from when you played?
Gosh, one play. Well, I scored a touchdown one time. I guess I'll take that. We were playing Auburn in '69 up here, and Pat Sullivan was a sophomore. It was my junior year, and I forget his backup, but we were 10 points or 12 points ahead or something, and he threw one right to me. And our middle linebacker was a guy named Ray Nettles. God rest his soul. He's not with us anymore, but he blocked the only guy that was between me and the goal line, and I scored. We were going to win anyway. It wasn't like that was a play that won a game. I never made a play that won a game, but I got lucky, and we were well coached, and that helped a lot. And we played some quarterbacks that liked to throw a lot, and they weren't very good at it, so that helped too.
So that was your favorite of your 18 interceptions.
I guess. Actually, my favorite was at Georgia Tech because they were about to score on us, and I intercepted the goal line, and then I wasn't very fast. I weaving my way back and forth up the field and getting a lot of blocks, and I got back 30 or 40 yards, but it wasn't like I was going to break away and outrun everybody. That never happened after high school. But it was just fun to play. My senior year was so much fun. It was Bill Battle's first year, and he brought in a guy named Larry Jones to run the defense. Buddy Bennett, the secondary, who ran us to death. I mean, we ran and ran and ran and ran. But Bobby Majors was a free safety, had never played in the secondary and intercepted 10 passes. Conrad Graham, who was eventually an All-American, was a cornerback. David Allen, who's a surgeon in Athens, Georgia, was a cornerback. It was really fun. Jackie Walker, the best player in the history of college football that's not in the Hall of Fame. We had a lot of fun that fall of 1970.
Well, Tim, on that note, thank you so much for this preview of volunteer football in 2020. I want to thank all of our audience members for your questions and for attending this. And I guess that just about wraps it up. Let's just hope that 17 days from now we're watching a Tennessee football game.
I hope so. And it's fun to be with you, and it's kind of gotten me in tune to we're going to be playing soon.
Let's hope.
Okay. Good to
All
be
right.
with
Thank
you.
you, Tim.
Sure thing.